Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. I've been asked to speak about the role of women in countering violent extremism. I was surprised I had to hear that I will be speaking about the role of the media. I have been informed that that is the paper to be presented by my brother, Malam Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In describing the ideal Muslim community, Almighty Allah says in the Holy Quran, "Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat lin-nas, ta'muruna bil ma'ruf wa tanhauna 'anil munkar wa tu'minuna billah." You are the best community ever raised among mankind. You enjoin what is good, you forbid what is evil, and you believe in Allah. In the hope that we can justify this vote of confidence from our Lord and Creator, I stand before you to talk about how we, as women, can combat the violent extremism from among our youth. But in doing so, I do not represent Muslim women alone. I represent all women and mothers because I believe that violent extremism is not the exclusive preserve of Muslim youth. Of course, the international media does its best to make it look so, thereby fueling anti-Muslim sentiments and Islamophobia. Since September 11, 2001, we have had to watch news of so-called Islamic terror at every top of every hour. And now that Islamic State or ISIS is making headlines over its bloody escapades, we are once again forced to accept a blame for what isn't our fault, nor is it a teaching of our faith. Like the new British Prime Minister, Mrs. Theresa May, observed, the murderous group is neither Islamic nor a state. This is the kind of statement that we Muslims should be making in defense of our increasingly battered image in international media. Groups that claim affiliation with Islam, but which perpetrate acts that are contrary to the teachings of Islam, should be disowned by us, and every effort be made to find out who they really are, so that the blame for their dastardly deeds will lie squarely with them and not with us. When we seem too keen to accept what the media broadcast said against us, that we end up joining a chorus against ourselves. But the Holy Quran has warned us against believing stories that aren't proved. In Surah An-Nur, among the verses that sought to defend Ummuna Aisha radiallahu anha against that abominable slander, the companions were asked, when you heard it, why did the faithful men and women not think well of their own people and say this is evident falsehood? Quran chapter 24 verse 12. Be that as it may, it is true that we do have problems of youth violence that we have to address as a matter of urgency. The Boko Haram insurgency is unfortunately the reason some of us are forced to believe that violent extremism is something peculiar to Muslims. Long before now, we had bloody sectarian crisis, especially in the northern part of this country. But we are still having them. Since just 2 days ago, people were killed in cold blood at Godogodo village in Kaduna State. It is for this reason that we need to rub minds and take decisive action on how to curb violent extremism among our youth. As women and therefore mothers, the first thing to do is to be observant. We must be on the lookout for extremist behavior or pronouncements from our children. I once heard the story of a lady whose young son approached her in the middle of a wedding and said he wanted to advise her that she and his father should go and have another wedding Fatiha. She asked him why, and he said to her that he had that at their wedding, a certain, I don't want to name it, but a certain Salatin Nabi was read, which to the sect he belongs to nullifies their marriage. The mother got so angry, they said she started beating the young man there and then in front of everyone, and she chased him out of the crowd. I think if I were in her shoes, maybe after venting her anger, I'll call the young man and ask him where he got that, because that is a trace of extremist preaching. God knows who did it, but we know from history that all those people who embraced Islam during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he never told them to renew their marriage vows. Everybody who came into Islam as a married couple remained with the marriage that they did under Jahili laws. So how can you now say because a certain kind of Salatin Nabi was read at a wedding that the marriage was null and void? So this is the kind of preaching we should be on the lookout for. When our young children come out making pronouncements that are incredible, we should try to find out where they got them from and try to see how far they are influenced by such people. Another thing we should do as mothers is to monitor our children's movements. Who do they move with? Who are their close friends? Sometimes it is through this kind of association that they tend to mix up with people with extremist views, and then sometimes they end up imbibing the same. Before you know it, if you don't pay too much attention, your child can become a stranger. And it is only when things are really bad that we will get to know. Now we also have to do something. We have to make sure that when they say they are going to school, that they go to school. Sometimes they will say that because they are old enough, like teenage young men may be allowed to go to school on their own without the driver or without any adult help. And some of them end up somewhere. I had an experience when I was the editor of Armenia newspaper. There was a day we were to have an editorial board meeting, and my chief sub-editor couldn't show up. When the meeting was over, he came, and I asked him why. Because his family lives in Kaduna, and he was working here in Abuja. He told me that he had to miss the meeting because he found out that in 3 months, his teenage son had never been to school. But every morning, the boy will wake up and get ready and wear his uniform and leave home. It was when the school noticed it and they called his attention. Otherwise, the mother thought her son was going to school. Now, these are the kind of situations in which the son can go elsewhere, imbibe behaviors that are undesirable, and you will not know until it's too late. So one has to be alert enough to monitor their children's movements. And then, but there is something we need to note here. It is easier for people like me and other women who are relatively comfortable. We have good jobs. We have working husbands who support us. But there are women out there for whom every single day is a struggle. And unfortunately, it's the children of such women that end up in trouble when riots and similar crises occur. With such women, I think the most important thing to do is to empower them before we go into asking them, because it's like we are actually able to monitor our children, know what they do and stuff like that, because we have the leisure to do so. With such women, they don't even have the luxury. Every single morning is a struggle. When they wake up in the morning, they worry about what to feed the children. And with 5, 6, 7 mouths to feed, sometimes all they worry about is that food. So by evening, when the children come home, they have no idea how they spent their day. And this is why it is very important to reach out to, especially the urban poor, because those are the people whose children usually participate in crisis. And then we reach out to them and empower them in such a way that whenever they can monitor what their children do. The children also, yeah. So in the course of this empowerment, we can think of situations like a program that was once implemented in Kano under the Malam Shekaro administration. My brother Malam Bala is here to say more about it. But one program that they call Fansar Entalla, which is like liberating the hawkers, can do very well in helping those women who have to worry about their children, from morning to evening, and so they don't have the time to monitor their movements and see what they do. In Fansar Entalla, what happened was a number of parents were called by the Shekaro administration, and then they were given money to start some local business they can do from home. Some were given sewing machines and money. Some were given grinding machines. And then their daughters were taken away from them and enrolled in school so that the girls would no longer hawk. If we can get the government support in creating programs like this, some women will be so empowered enough that they will now have time to watch what their children do and monitor their activities and make sure that when they are mixing up with bad elements or they are getting radicalized, they will be able to note it. Another thing we should think about is encouraging the government to, first of all, we encourage the ulama to preach peace and good behavior, citing instances from the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and there are many of them we can think of. Right now, when you get a hold of these young men who are easily sent to commit violent acts, they usually say that they are embarking on jihad. and they don't know what jihad means, because the first thing they should be civilized, taught to know is that you cannot embark on a jihad without an authority calling you to do so. But more often than not, what they think about is that if somebody is some selfish demagogue said to them, go ahead and do this and that because somebody has either blasphemed against Islam or somebody had done this and that, they'll just take the law into their hands. I think there is a need for us to make sure that such children are well educated, and this kind of education should come from the ulama, who have a chance every Friday to deliver a sermon. They can take up this challenge and make sure that every Friday there's a sermon that touches on the youth and how they can improve their lives, how they can be of good conduct, and more especially how they can abide by the law. They should know that taking the law into their hands is totally against Islam, and they should not think for a minute that even if they call it a jihad, that it is a jihad in that sense. The government should also try to monitor, I'm sure lots of people will not agree with me, but I think preaching in mosques and churches should be monitored by government. It's true that most people are qualified to preach, but there are people whose methodology is faulty. And it is this kind of methods, like we've heard from my brother Lamido, Abdullah Lamido, when Umar-Yusuf started, he was very eloquent. He could even convince young undergraduate students to drop their books and follow him. Imagine young people whose parents suffered to make sure they went through primary and secondary education. Just when you are in the university, someone comes out of the blues and says to you, what you are doing is haram, and then you buy it. It takes a lot of effort to fish out people like that, but Umar-Yusuf was only able to go that far because I think there wasn't enough monitoring of his activities. We should be mindful of what happens around us. That is something both mothers and fathers should do. There are times when we pass by our streets and we see young men who from morning till evening have nothing to do but play football, and they are of school-going age. So with such people, we can prevent crisis by going to them and asking what they do, why they are there. And if there's a way we can help, we try to reach out to them. This is because they are the same people, because they are idle, they don't have much to do, they don't have anything to lose. And someone has said, beware of the man who has nothing to lose. These are young men possibly because their parents cannot afford expensive private education, and the public education isn't worth it today. So they end up spending their whole days either playing football or otherwise loitering around. It's very easy to get these people and mobilize them to do the unlawful. So this is why we should be mindful of such people around us, try to talk to them, get to see how we can help. And be sure that when we do it, we can reach out to the relevant authorities and see how we can be helped. Another group of people who are easily incited to violence are drug addicts. And we have them in tons in our towns and cities. So such people, we should try to reach out to also and see how they can be rehabilitated, and maybe the school dropouts be sent back to school. When I lived in Kaduna, I knew Al-Hidayah Charity was very much into drug rehabilitation. I don't know how far they've gone now, but they were able to take care of a lot of Kaduna youth who are loitering the streets and who are into drug addiction. This kind of thing can help. Now, another thing we should embark on, I don't know how we can fit it into our syllabus, is that there are, for people like Umar-Yusuf to succeed, it's because there is a knowledge vacuum, in what we taught our children. For instance, we have a long history. Islam has a long history of scientists and innovators. Even though there was a deliberate attempt, as we have read later on by the Western world, to phase out that, make it look like from the Greeks, it now came to the Western world. But in between, there were the Muslims. And they did a lot of innovations. Some of the things they found out, they discovered in those days, some of the researches they made led to some of the things we use now. Many people will tell you that the modern computer is the brainchild of Al-Khwarizmi, because the computations he did in those days were what led to what we found out today. The glasses I use now, they will tell you, was the brainchild of Al-Haytham, the Egyptian scientist. So many other things. The movement, what they do up there with the stars. You know, it's also as a result of so many research made by Muslim scientists in the days when they had the observatories. But we don't teach our young men and women that. And this is why in between, because of this gap, somebody can come and say to them, Islam is against knowledge, Islam is against science, and they can believe it. So if there's a way we can sneak this in, I think it will help, such that somebody like Umar-Yusuf can never arise again and say to them such and such a thing is haram, and that they will listen to him. I heard that long before Umar-Yusuf, there was another guy who existed in ABU, and that so many people fell victim. I don't want to name names, but that so many people left universities. No, no, I think it's risky to name names, but I heard that the man was able to make so many people drop out of school, and they they left their school.
Since you don't want to name names, so since you don't want to name names, time up.
Okay, sir.
2 minutes to round up.
Okay, inshallah. So I think we should try as much as we can. But going back to, because this paper is essentially about how women can help curb violent extremism. It is very important for us to know what to do about the average, not Western educated northern woman in our towns and cities. They are really the ones who bear those children who are used in this kind of violence. If there is a way we can empower them, they will have more time to devote to their children and monitor their activities, and hopefully we'll see the end of this kind of extreme violence. I mean, this kind of violence that is born out of extremism. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.